A mountain wind bit through Eleanor's threadbare dress as she stumbled up the rocky trail, her feet bloodied and her vision blurred with tears. 3 days she'd been running from her father's hunting party. 3 days since she'd fled the altar where Judge Blackwood waited to claim his 16-year-old bride. Her father had sold her like livestock, and she'd chosen the wilderness over that fate. The cabin materialized through the pine trees like a mirage. Smoke curled from its chimney, promising warmth she hadn't felt in days. Eleanor's knees buckled as she reached the door, her fist barely making a sound against the weathered wood before darkness crept into the edges of her vision. Before we continue with Eleanor's story, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. The door opened, and she looked up into a face carved from the mountain itself. The man towering above her had shoulders that blocked out the fading sunlight, arms thick as tree trunks, and eyes the color of storm clouds. A thick beard covered his jaw, and a scar ran from his temple to his cheekbone. A man who'd survived things that would have killed softer men. "Please," Eleanor whispered, her trembling fingers fumbling with the single piece of jewelry she still possessed, her mother's silver locket. "I have this. I can pay. I just need—" "Put that away." His voice rumbled like distant thunder as he crouched beside her, making himself smaller despite his massive frame. "What you need isn't something you can buy." He scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing, carrying her inside where the fire's warmth immediately began thawing her frozen limbs. He set her in a chair near the hearth and disappeared, returning moments later with a thick blanket that he wrapped around her shoulders with surprising gentleness. "Name's Callum Reed," he said, ladling soup into a wooden bowl. "You're safe here. That's all you need to know right now." Eleanor's hands shook as she took the bowl, the first real food she'd smelled in days. Eleanor Hartwell. She managed between sips. "My father, he's looking for me. Judge Blackwood, too. They'll come. Let them come." Callum's jaw tightened as he stirred the fire. "No one takes a woman from my mountain, unless she wants to go." She studied him in the firelight, this giant of a man who lived alone in the wilderness. Everything about him should have terrified her after what she'd endured, after her father's violence and Blackwood's possessive cruelty. But something in the way he kept his distance, the way he'd offered help without demanding anything in return, made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Callum was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Because 5 years ago, I didn't help someone who needed it. My sister. I was working a claim 3 valleys over when raiders came. By the time I got back—" He trailed off, his massive hands clenching into fists. "I made myself a promise that day. Never again would I turn away from someone in need." Eleanor's heart ached for the pain in his voice. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just eat and rest. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes." The days that followed fell into a rhythm that slowly began to heal something broken inside Eleanor. Callum woke before dawn, checking his trap lines and hunting while she tended the cabin. At first, her domestic efforts were clumsy. She'd been raised as a lady, taught embroidery and piano, not cooking and cleaning. But Callum never criticized her burned biscuits or oversalted stew. "Tastes fine," he'd say, though she saw him reaching for water more than once. In the afternoons, he taught her to survive. how to recognize edible plants from poisonous ones, how to set snares, how to read weather in the sky and animal tracks in the mud. His teaching was patient, his corrections gentle, and Eleanor found herself growing stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. "You're a natural," Callum said one afternoon, as she successfully snared her first rabbit. His rare smile transformed his severe face into something almost boyish. "I have a good teacher," Eleanor replied, and felt warmth flood her cheeks when his eyes held hers a moment too long. But it was the evenings that undid her careful guards. They'd sit by the fire, Callum carving wood, while Eleanor mended clothes. And they'd talk. He told her about growing up in these mountains, about his sister Sarah who'd loved wildflowers and could outride any man in the territory. Eleanor shared memories of her mother, dead these 3 years, and how her father had changed after losing her, how alcohol and gambling debts had transformed him into a stranger. "He wasn't always cruel," she whispered one night. "That's what makes it harder somehow." "Doesn't excuse what he did," Callum said firmly. "Trying to sell you off like that. I know, but part of me still remembers the father who taught me to read, who called me his little bird." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Callum's chair scraped against the floor as he moved closer, kneeling beside her so their eyes were level. "You have every right to mourn who he was, Eleanor, but that doesn't mean you owe him who you are." His understanding broke something loose in her chest, and she found herself sobbing into his shoulder as his strong arms came around her, careful, protective, asking nothing but offering everything. A week became 2, and Eleanor noticed the way Callum's eyes followed her movements around the cabin, the way his breathing changed when their hands accidentally brushed, the way he sometimes looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. She felt it too, this magnetic pull between them that grew stronger each day. But fear lived in her bones now, planted there by her father's backhands and Blackwood's predatory stares. She'd catch herself flinching when Callum moved too quickly, and the shame of it would burn through her. The confrontation came during a thunderstorm that shook the cabin's walls. Lightning split the sky as Eleanor helped Callum secure the shutters, and when thunder crashed directly overhead, she cried out and stumbled. Callum caught her instinctively, his arms encircling her waist, and Eleanor felt her heart hammer against her ribs, but not entirely from fear. "I've got you," he murmured, and she realized she believed him. But then his hand moved to steady her shoulder, and muscle memory took over. Eleanor jerked back violently, her elbow catching him in the ribs as panic flooded her system. She pressed herself against the wall, breathing hard, hating herself for the reaction. "Eleanor." Callum had backed up immediately, hands raised and visible. "You're safe. I swear to you, you're safe." "I know," she gasped. "I know that, but my body doesn't." "You scare me," she admitted, the words tearing out of her. "Not because you've done anything, but because I feel things when I'm near you. Things I didn't think I'd ever feel after everything that happened. And I don't know how to—" "Good," Callum interrupted softly. She blinked. "What?" He took a single step closer, moving slowly enough that she could stop him with a word. "Good, that I scare you, so you'll know how deep I'll fall for you." His storm-gray eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Because, Eleanor, I'm terrified too. Terrified of how much I want to keep you here, not because you need protection, but because I need you. Terrified that I'm falling in love with you, and you'll leave when you're strong enough." "Callum, let me finish." He ran a hand through his dark hair, making it stand on end. "I know you've been hurt. I know trust isn't something you can just give me because I ask for it, but I'm asking anyway. I'm asking you to let me prove that not every man will hurt you, that I would die before I laid a hand on you in anger." Eleanor's legs felt weak. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such raw honesty, such vulnerability. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to let someone close." "Then we'll figure it out together," Callum said. "We'll go slow as you need, but don't run from this, from us, because you're scared. Stay, please." The word hung in the air between them, a question and a prayer. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the cabin, Eleanor felt something shift. She thought of the past weeks, of Callum's patient teaching and gentle understanding, of how she'd begun to laugh again, to feel like herself instead of someone's property. "I'm staying," she said, and watched his whole body relax. "But Callum, I can't promise." "You don't have to promise anything, except that you'll tell me when something's too much. Can you do that?" Eleanor nodded, and when he opened his arms in invitation, she stepped into them on her own terms. His embrace was warm and solid, and for the first time since her mother's death, Eleanor felt like she'd come home. The next weeks were a dance of advance and retreat, of trust built in tiny increments. Callum taught her to shoot, standing behind her to adjust her aim, but always checking first. "Can I touch your elbow? Your shoulder?" Eleanor learned to ride his massive bay gelding, Thunder, and the freedom of galloping through mountain meadows brought laughter bubbling up from somewhere she'd thought was dead inside her. One evening, Callum returned from hunting with a gash across his forearm, blood soaking his sleeve. Eleanor's hands shook as she cleaned the wound, threading a needle with practiced precision she'd learned from mending clothes. "This will hurt," she warned. "I trust you," he said simply, and Eleanor's heart clenched at the faith in those 3 words. She stitched carefully, her fingers gentle despite the gruesome work. When she finished and wrapped the wound in clean cloth, she looked up to find Callum watching her, with an expression that made her pulse race. "What?" she asked softly. "I see a woman worth every risk," he murmured. "Worth falling for." Eleanor's breath caught. Slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, she reached up and traced the scar on his cheekbone. "How did you get this?" "Grizzly, 3 years back. Fought for my life, and won, but barely." She leaned forward and pressed the gentlest of kisses to the scar. "I'm glad you—" His kiss was nothing like she'd expected. Not demanding or possessive, but reverent. A question asked with lips and tongue that promised safety alongside passion. Eleanor melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he angled his head to deepen the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Callum rested his forehead against hers. "We can stop any time," he rasped. "Just say the word." "I don't want to stop," Eleanor said, surprised by her own certainty. "I want this. I want you." That night, they discovered each other with painstaking slowness. Callum mapped every inch of her skin with his hands and mouth, always watching her face for signs of distress. When she tensed, he'd pause, whispering reassurances until she relaxed again. And when he finally joined their bodies together, Eleanor gasped, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rightness of it. "Together," Callum whispered against her throat. "Always together." The idyll couldn't last forever. Eleanor woke one morning to find Callum standing at the window, his expression grim. "Riders," he said. 4 of them, coming up the mountain trail." Her blood turned to ice. "My father. Get dressed. We're not running." Callum's voice was hard as granite as he loaded his rifle. "But we're not letting them take you either." Eleanor threw on her clothes with shaking hands, her mind racing. She'd known this day would come, but she'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that her father would give up the search. The knock came like thunder. "Eleanor Hartwell, I know you're in there, girl. Come out now, and I won't press charges against whoever's harboring you." Callum opened the door, his massive frame filling the entrance. "She's not coming with you." Eleanor recognized her father immediately, the same angular face, now flushed with anger and drink. Judge Blackwood stood beside him, pale and thin in his black suit, his eyes gleaming with possessive fury. 2 hired guns flanked them, hands resting on their pistols. "That's my daughter you're keeping," her father snarled. "She's contracted to marry the judge, legal and binding." "Legal and binding requires consent," Eleanor said, stepping into view beside Callum. "Which I never gave." Blackwood's lip curled. "Your father gave consent on your behalf. That's all the law requires for a minor." "I'm 19, Eleanor shot back. "Not a minor, and I refuse the match." "You'll do as you're told." Her father started forward, but Callum's rifle came up in one smooth motion. "Another step, and we'll have problems," Callum said quietly. "The kind that gets settled with bullets." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Blackwood pulled a paper from his coat. "I have a warrant for your arrest, Reed. Kidnapping and corruption of a minor. The sheriff's office will have a posse here by nightfall." "Lies," Eleanor spat. "I came here of my own free will. Callum saved my life when I was fleeing a forced marriage. If there are any crimes here, they're yours. Attempting to marry a woman against her will." "Your word against ours," her father sneered. "And who's the law gonna believe? A respected judge and a concerned father, or a mountain hermit and a hysterical girl?" The truth of it hit Eleanor like a physical blow. In this territory, men like Blackwood held all the power. She looked at Callum, saw the calculation in his eyes as he weighed their options, and made her decision. "Then we'll go to the territorial governor in Helena," she announced. "Present our case directly." Blackwood paled slightly. "The governor won't." "Won't what?" "Listen to testimony about a corrupt judge trying to force a woman into marriage, about a father selling his daughter." Eleanor's voice gained strength. "I'm educated, Judge. My mother made sure of that. I can speak eloquently before any authority, and I'll wager the governor has daughters of his own." For the first time, doubt flickered across her father's face. "Ellie, don't call me that." Eleanor's voice could have cut glass. "You lost the right to call me that when you struck me for refusing to marry him, when you locked me in my room for 3 days without food, when you chose gambling debts over your daughter's happiness." "I did what I had to do," her father exploded. "You think I wanted this? I owed Blackwood everything after he cleared my debts. This was the only way." "There's always another way," Callum interjected. "You just chose the easy one." Before her father could respond, gunfire erupted from the tree line. Everyone dove for cover as bullets chewed into the cabin's logs. Through the chaos, Eleanor saw 3 men she didn't recognize advancing, rough-looking bandits with rifles raised. "Who the hell?" Blackwood started, but Callum cut him off. "Inside! Everyone inside, now!" Training overrode enmity. They all tumbled into the cabin as more shots rang out. Callum slammed the door and barred it, then moved to the window. "Someone want to explain who's shooting at us?" he demanded. One of the hired guns, a weathered man with a graying beard, spat blood. "Daltrey gang. We ran into them on the trail yesterday. Blackwood here owed their boss money from a poker game and never paid." Blackwood had gone white as snow. "I paid." "You paid with counterfeit notes," the gunman growled. "Daltrey don't forgive that kind of insult." Callum cursed fluently. "How many?" "Saw at least 6 when we passed their camp." Eleanor's mind raced as bullets continued to pepper the cabin. They were pinned down, outnumbered, and running out of time. But then she remembered. "The old mining tunnel," she said urgently. "Callum, you told me about it. The one that comes out near the waterfall." "Too dangerous," Callum said. "Part of it collapsed last winter." "More dangerous than staying here?" Eleanor challenged. "They'll burn us out or wait until we're out of ammunition. At least the tunnel gives us a chance." Callum's eyes met hers, and she saw pride flash across his face. "You're right." He turned to the others. "There's a trapdoor in the back room. Leads to an old mine shaft. Eleanor and I will lead. Everyone else, follow close and stay quiet." Her father grabbed Eleanor's arm. "I won't! You don't have a choice." Eleanor jerked free. "Stay and die, or swallow your pride and follow. Those are your options." The tunnel was even worse than Eleanor remembered Callum describing. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the walls pressed in close enough to brush shoulders on both sides. They moved in single file, Callum's lantern providing the only light. Behind them, they could hear shouts as the Daltrey gang discovered their escape route. Halfway through, Eleanor heard an ominous creaking. "Callum, run!" he bellowed. The tunnel collapsed behind them in a roar of earth and timber. Eleanor felt Callum's hand grab hers, yanking her forward as debris rained down. They burst into open air at the waterfall's base, coughing and covered in dust, all 8 of them miraculously intact. But they barely caught their breath when rifle fire erupted again. 2 of the Daltrey gang had circled around, cutting off their escape route down the mountain. Callum pushed Eleanor behind a boulder and returned fire, but they were badly exposed. "We need to split up," Callum shouted. "Draw them in different directions." "No!" Eleanor's scream cut through the chaos. One of the bandits had flanked them, his rifle aimed directly at Callum's back. Without thinking, Eleanor grabbed Callum's pistol from its holster and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her over, but her aim was true. The bandit went down, clutching his shoulder. In that moment of distraction, Callum spun and took down the second attacker. The remaining gang members scattered at the loss of their companions. In the ringing silence that followed, Callum stared at Eleanor with something like awe. "You saved my life." "Partners," Eleanor said simply. "You said we're in this together." Her father, leaning against a tree trunk and looking older than his years, cleared his throat. That was brave, Ellie. Stupid, but brave. Learned it from you," Eleanor said quietly. "Once upon a time, you taught me to stand up for what mattered." Her father's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing right by you, finding you a husband who could provide." "You were selling me to pay your debts," Eleanor said flatly. "Don't pretty it up with noble intentions." "You're right." Her father sank down on a fallen log, suddenly looking defeated. "Your mother would be ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of me." Blackwood, nursing a twisted ankle, sneered. "This doesn't change anything. The contract is void," one of the hired guns interrupted. "Boss, I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I've never seen you push for something like this. The lady don't want you, plain as day. Time to let it go. I paid good money. You paid fake money. Which means your debts to Daltrey are still outstanding," Callum pointed out. "I'd say you've got bigger problems than an unwilling bride." The sheriff's posse found them an hour later, drawn by the gunfire. Eleanor watched as they arrested 3 members of the Daltrey gang, including the ones she and Callum had wounded. The sheriff, a grizzled veteran named McCreary, listened to everyone's testimony with growing disgust. "Judge Blackwood," McCreary said finally, "I'm placing you under arrest for attempted forced marriage and conspiracy to commit kidnapping." Mr. Hartwell, you'll be charged with child endangerment and aiding in the above crimes. She's 19, her father protested. That's not a child. Old enough to make her own choices then, McCreary said, dryly, which means the contract you signed on her behalf is worthless. He turned to Eleanor. Miss Hartwell, you'll need to give testimony at the trial. Where can we find you? Eleanor looked at Callum, saw the question in his eyes, and made her choice. I'll be here, on the mountain, with Callum Reed, She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Her fiancé? Callum finished firmly, reaching for her hand. If she'll have me. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. The next months passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Eleanor testified at Blackwood's trial, her clear, educated testimony swaying even the most skeptical jurors. Blackwood was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Her father, who'd shown genuine remorse and cooperated with authorities, received a suspended sentence and probation. I want to make this right, her father told Eleanor on the courthouse steps. I know I can't undo what I did, but could we try to be father and daughter again? Eleanor considered him for a long moment, this broken man who'd once been her hero. Not yet, she said finally, but maybe someday. For now, I need to build my own life. Her father nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. I understand. Just be happy, Ellie. That's all your mother would have wanted. The wedding took place in the mountain meadow where Callum had taught Eleanor to shoot. No judge officiated. Instead, a traveling preacher performed the ceremony, witnessed by the sheriff, Callum's handful of mountain neighbors, and even some of the hired guns who'd helped them escape the Daltrey gang. Eleanor wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, adorned with wildflowers from the meadow. Callum stood waiting in a clean shirt and his best pants, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked toward him. I, Callum Reed, take you, Eleanor Hartwell, he said when the time came, his voice rough with emotion. Not as property, but as a partner. Not to control, but to cherish. I promise to honor your strength, protect your heart, and walk beside you. Not in front or behind, but beside you, all the days of my life. Eleanor's vows were equally simple and profound. I, Eleanor Reed, take you, Callum Reed. You taught me that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength can be gentle, and that trust can be rebuilt one day at a time. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your love for all my days. When they kissed as husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the mountains. 5 years later, Eleanor stood in the doorway of their cabin, significantly larger now, with additions for the children she hoped would someday fill those rooms. She watched Callum teaching a young woman from the nearest settlement how to track deer, his patience and gentleness unchanged by time. The student was running from an arranged marriage, just as Eleanor once had. Word had spread through the territory about the mountain man and his wife, who offered sanctuary to women in desperate situations. They'd helped 7 women escape abuse or forced marriages, finding them safe passage or teaching them survival skills to start new lives. Callum caught her watching and smiled, that rare expression that still made her heart flutter. Later, after their student had settled in the guest room, he pulled Eleanor into his arms by the fire. Regrets? He asked, as he sometimes did. Not a single one, Eleanor answered. as she always did. You scared me once, Callum Reed, but you taught me that being scared of love is just another way of knowing how deep you can fall. And I'd fall for you over and over again. Together, he murmured against her hair. Always together, she agreed. Outside, a mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings and the peace that comes from love freely chosen and deeply earned. The winter came early that year, and with it, a woman unlike any Eleanor had helped before. She arrived on horseback in the middle of a snowstorm, her fine riding clothes torn and muddy, a rifle across her saddle, and determination blazing in her dark eyes. "My name is Catherine Moreau," she announced from the doorway, snow swirling around her. "I'm told you help women who have nowhere else to turn." Eleanor ushered her inside while Callum tended to her horse. Catherine was perhaps 30, with elegant features marred by a fresh bruise along her jaw and cuts on her knuckles that suggested she'd fought back. "Who hurt you?" Eleanor asked gently, wrapping a blanket around the woman's shoulders. "My husband. My late husband," Catherine corrected with grim satisfaction. "I shot him 3 hours ago when he came at me with a knife. Self-defense, but his family owns half of Virginia City. They'll hang me before they let me testify to what he did." Callum returned, brushing snow from his shoulders. He took one look at Catherine's injuries, and his jaw tightened. "You're safe here. We'll figure this out." But Catherine shook her head. "I can't stay. I have evidence, documents proving my husband was embezzling from his family's mining operation. I was going to use them to buy my freedom, but now," she pulled a leather satchel from beneath her cloak, "now they're the only thing that might save my life. If I can get them to the territorial marshal in Helena, expose what the Moreau family has been doing, maybe they'll be too busy defending themselves to come after me." "Helena's 2 weeks' ride in good weather," Callum said, glancing at the storm outside. "In this, a month, maybe more, the passes will be snowed in. Then I'll die trying," Catherine said, simply. "Better than waiting here for them to find me." Eleanor saw something of herself in Catherine's eyes, that desperate determination to survive, to be more than a victim. "What if we helped you get there?" Callum's head snapped toward her. "Eleanor, she can't make it alone, Callum. You know she can't." Eleanor moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his. "We have the supplies. We know the mountain trails. And if her evidence is as damaging as she says, we'd be helping more than just one woman. We'd be stopping men who hurt people with impunity." Callum was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching Eleanor's face. Finally, he sighed. "Together? Always together," Eleanor confirmed. They set out 3 days later when the storm broke, bundled in furs and leading pack horses loaded with supplies. The journey was brutal. Temperatures dropped so low that water froze in their canteens within minutes of being filled. They navigated narrow mountain passes where one wrong step meant a fatal plunge, and camped in caves when the wind howled too fierce to risk the open trail. Catherine proved herself a capable traveler, never complaining despite the hardship. Around their campfires at night, she shared her story, how she'd married young to a charming man who'd revealed his true nature only after the wedding, how his family's wealth and influence had made her a prisoner in her own home. "I tried to leave once," she said, staring into the flames. "Made it as far as the train station before his brothers dragged me back. He broke my arm that night, told everyone I'd fallen down the stairs." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "After that, I started planning, gathering evidence, waiting for my moment." "You're not a killer," Eleanor said softly. "You're a survivor." Catherine's eyes glistened. Tell that to the law when they catch me. On the 8th day, they spotted riders in the distance. 4 men, picking their way along the same trail. Callum studied them through his spyglass and cursed. Moreau's men. I recognize one from town. His brother, I think. They pushed their horses harder. But the pursuers were gaining. The confrontation came in a narrow canyon where retreat was impossible. The Moreau brothers, there were 3 of them, plus a hired gun, blocked the trail ahead. Catherine, the eldest brother, called out, "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Come with us peacefully, and we'll make sure the trial is fair." Fair? Catherine laughed bitterly. Like the trial your family gave that miner who accused you of claim jumping? The one who mysteriously drowned before he could testify? The brother's face hardened. You killed our blood. That demands justice. He tried to kill me first, Catherine shot back. I have scars to prove it. Witnesses who saw. Witnesses we've already paid to forget, the hired gun interrupted with a cruel smile. Nobody's going to believe a hysterical woman over the word of the Moreau family. Callum's hand moved to his rifle. The lady's not going anywhere she doesn't want to. This doesn't concern you, mountain man, the eldest Moreau snarled. Step aside, or... The gunshot that rang out didn't come from any of them. Eleanor watched in shock as the hired gun toppled from his saddle, a red stain spreading across his shoulder. From the rocks above, a figure emerged, weathered and gray-haired, but with eyes Eleanor would recognize anywhere. "Father?" she breathed. Thomas Hartwell scrambled down the rocks, his rifle still smoking. "Heard you might need help," he said gruffly. "Been following your trail for 2 days." The Moreau brothers had drawn their weapons, but now they faced 4 armed opponents instead of 3. The eldest brother's eyes darted between them, calculating odds. "This isn't over," he spat. "We'll bring the law down on all of you." "Go ahead," Thomas said. "I've already sent word to the territorial marshal about your family's embezzling. Seems your brother's widow had the good sense to make copies of those documents before she left Virginia City. They're sitting in a bank vault in Helena right now, along with my sworn testimony about this little ambush attempt. It was a bluff. Eleanor could see it in her father's eyes. But the Moreau brothers didn't know that. They exchanged uncertain glances, and Eleanor seized the moment. "How many people have you hurt?" she called out. "How many lives has your family destroyed to protect your secrets? Catherine's not the first person you've tried to silence, and she won't be the last unless someone stops you. You don't understand how the world works, little girl," the eldest brother sneered. "I understand that bullies rely on people being too scared to fight back," Eleanor shot back. "But we're not scared anymore." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Then, to everyone's surprise, the youngest Moreau brother lowered his gun. "This is wrong, Jacob," he said quietly. "You know it is. Samuel was a monster. What he did to her, I saw the bruises. We all did." "Shut up, Peter," the eldest brother hissed. "No." Peter Moreau's voice gained strength. "I'm done shutting up. I'm done pretending our family's money makes everything right. Let her go. Let them all go." For a moment, Eleanor thought the eldest brother would shoot his own sibling. But then the middle brother sighed and holstered his weapon. "Peter's right. This has gone far enough." Outnumbered and abandoned by his own brothers, Jacob Moreau had no choice but to back down. "This isn't finished," he warned, but he was already turning his horse. They watched the Moreau party retreat until they were specks in the distance. Then Eleanor turned to her father, emotions warring inside her. "Why did you come?" Thomas looked older than she remembered, his face lined with regret and something that might have been pride. because a man gave me a second chance I didn't deserve, and I wanted to pay that forward. And because, he paused, swallowing hard, because you're my daughter, and I failed you when you needed me most. I can't undo that, but maybe I can do right by you now. Eleanor felt Callum's hand squeeze hers supportively. She studied her father, this flawed man who'd hurt her so deeply, but who just risked his life to save hers. Forgiveness wasn't simple or easy, but perhaps it was possible. We're heading to Helena, she said finally. Catherine needs to deliver her evidence. You can ride with us, but Father, this doesn't erase what happened. This is a beginning, not an ending. I know, Thomas said quietly, and I'll take whatever you're willing to give. The arrival in Helena was less dramatic than Eleanor expected. Catherine walked into the marshal's office, handed over her documents, and gave her testimony with calm precision. The evidence was damning. Years of fraud, claim jumping, and intimidation documented in meticulous detail. This will bring down the whole Moreau operation, Marshal Davies said, flipping through the papers. You've done the territory a service, Mrs. Moreau. It's Miss Moreau now, Catherine corrected. Or perhaps just Catherine. I'd like to be my own person for once. The marshal nodded. As for the shooting, given the circumstances and your husband's history, I'm ruling it self-defense. You're free to go. Eleanor watched relief wash over Catherine's face, followed quickly by something else. Uncertainty. I don't know where to go, Catherine admitted quietly. Everything I had was tied to the Moreau name. Come back to the mountain, Eleanor offered immediately, at least until you figure out what's next. But Catherine surprised her by shaking her head. Thank you, but no. You gave me something more valuable than shelter. You showed me I could fight back. Now I want to help others do the same. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. I'm thinking of opening a boarding house here in Helena. A place where women in trouble can stay while they get back on their feet. Would you visit sometimes? Help me with the ones who need teaching. We'd be honored, Callum said. They stayed in Helena for a week, helping Catherine establish her boarding house and ensuring the Moreau investigation was proceeding. Eleanor's father remained as well, working odd jobs and keeping a respectful distance. One evening, he asked Eleanor to dinner. They sat in a simple restaurant, awkward silence stretching between them. Finally, Thomas spoke. I'm staying in Helena. Found work as a bookkeeper at the mining office. It's honest work, and it pays enough. I'm glad, Eleanor said cautiously. I'm not drinking anymore, her father continued. Haven't touched a drop since the trial. I know that doesn't fix anything, but... He met her eyes, and she saw genuine pain there. Your mother would have hated what I became. I hate what I became. I'm trying to be better. Eleanor thought about forgiveness, about second chances, and the long road of healing. Actions matter more than words, Father. Show me you've changed. Maybe in time. That's all I'm asking for, Thomas said. Time and a chance. Spring came to the mountains with explosive beauty. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows. And Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. What if I'm not ready? She confessed to Callum one night, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. What if I don't know how to be a mother? Then we'll figure it out together, Callum said, echoing the promise they'd made to each other. Just like everything else. The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness left Eleanor weak for weeks, and as her belly grew, she found herself unable to do many of the tasks she'd taken pride in. She hated feeling helpless, hated needing Callum's help with things she'd once done easily. I'm useless, she muttered one day, frustrated to tears after dropping a water bucket for the third time. Callum knelt beside her, taking her face in his hands. You're growing our child. You're doing the most important work in the world. Let me do the rest for a while. In her 7th month, a complication arose. Eleanor woke in the night to pain and bleeding that sent Callum racing down the mountain for the midwife. The hours that followed were a blur of fear and pain, Eleanor clinging to consciousness while Callum held her hand and whispered fierce promises. "Don't you leave me," he said, his voice breaking. "You hear me, Eleanor Reed? We've come too far for you to leave now." Not planning on it, Eleanor gasped. "But Callum, if something happens, nothing's going to happen. Listen to me." She gripped his hand with all her remaining strength. "If you have to choose the baby. Promise me." "No." Callum's face was granite. "I won't lose you. I can't." "Promise me." Eleanor's scream tore through the cabin. "I promise we'll both survive," Callum said instead. "Both of you. Because you're stronger than this, and I won't let either of you go." Whether it was his faith, the midwife's skill, or sheer stubbornness, Eleanor pulled through. Their daughter was born as the sun rose, tiny and perfect and howling with outrage at being thrust into the world. "Sarah," Eleanor whispered, naming their daughter after Callum's lost sister. "Her name is Sarah." Callum wept as he held his daughter for the first time. This mountain of a man, reduced to tears by 8 pounds of squalling infant. "She's perfect," he said. "You're both perfect." The first year of motherhood challenged Eleanor in ways she'd never anticipated. Sarah was colicky and rarely slept, leaving Eleanor exhausted and often in tears herself. She'd expected to feel an instant, overwhelming love, but instead she felt mostly tired and inadequate. "I'm a terrible mother," she confessed to Catherine during one of her visits. "I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel." Catherine, who'd become a dear friend, smiled gently. "You feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and scared you're doing everything wrong. That's what every new mother feels. The love grows as you get to know her. Give yourself grace, Eleanor." Slowly, things did get easier. Sarah's colic eased, and Eleanor began to see her daughter's personality emerging, fierce and stubborn, with Callum's gray eyes and Eleanor's stubborn chin. The first time Sarah smiled at her, Eleanor felt something break open in her chest. "There you are," she whispered to her daughter. "I've been waiting to meet you." When Sarah was 6 months old, Eleanor's father asked to visit. She'd been exchanging letters with him, cautious, careful correspondence that slowly rebuilt bridges long burned. Callum made himself scarce that afternoon, giving them space. Thomas held his granddaughter with trembling hands, tears streaming down his weathered face. "She looks like your mother," he said hoarsely. "Same eyes." "She's strong like her too," Eleanor said. "Survived a difficult birth with more fight than anyone expected." "Like her mother," Thomas said, looking at Eleanor with something like awe. "You are always stronger than I gave you credit for. Stronger than me, certainly." They talked for hours, really talked for the first time in years. Thomas spoke honestly about his struggles with alcohol, his shame over his failures, and his determination to be better. Eleanor shared her fears about motherhood, her joy in her marriage, and the life she'd built in the mountains. "I'm proud of you," Thomas said finally. "I know I have no right to be, after everything, but I am." Eleanor felt something hard and angry inside her begin to soften. "You'll never be the father you were before Mother died," she said honestly. "That man is gone. But maybe you can be someone new, someone who gets to know his granddaughter and helps her understand that people can change." "I'd like that," Thomas said quietly. more than you know. By the time Sarah turned 2, Eleanor and Callum's mountain sanctuary had become something of a legend in the territory. Women fleeing abuse, escaping forced marriages, or simply needing a fresh start found their way to the cabin. Some stayed for weeks, others for months. Eleanor taught them practical skills, while Callum showed them how to protect themselves. One autumn afternoon, a woman arrived who brought news that changed everything. Her name was Margaret Collins, and she was a journalist from San Francisco. "I'm writing a series of articles about women's rights in the frontier territories," she explained, her notebook at the ready. "I've heard remarkable things about what you're doing here. Women who found safety, learned independence, and built new lives. Would you be willing to share your story?" Eleanor was hesitant. "We're not doing anything special. We're just helping people who need it." "That's exactly what makes it special," Margaret insisted. "In a world where women are still property in many places, you're proving they can be so much more. Your story could inspire others. It could change laws." After discussing it with Callum, Eleanor agreed. Over the next week, Margaret interviewed them both, as well as several women they'd helped. She visited Catherine's boarding house in Helena and documented the network of support they'd built. The articles appeared, 6 months later, in newspapers across the country. Eleanor's story, fleeing a forced marriage, finding love and strength in the mountains, building a refuge for others, captured the public imagination. Letters began arriving from across the nation, some thanking them, others condemning them for corrupting traditional values. But along with the letters came something unexpected: donations. People sent money to help support their work, enough that Callum and Eleanor could expand their cabin into a proper safe house. Catherine's boarding house in Helena grew as well, and soon they were part of a network spanning 3 territories. "You've started something bigger than you know," Margaret told Eleanor during a return visit. "Women are organizing similar refuges in Denver, Santa Fe, even back east. You've shown them it's possible." Eleanor looked around at the expanded cabin, at the 4 women currently staying with them, at Sarah playing with wooden blocks that Callum had carved. "I just wanted to help people the way we were helped," she said, "to make sure no one had to face what I faced alone." "That's how all great movements start," Margaret replied. "One person deciding that things can be different." That night, after everyone was asleep, Eleanor and Callum sat by the fire as they'd done countless times before. Sarah slept peacefully in her cradle nearby, and outside, the mountain wind whispered through the pines. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked. "The quiet life you had before I stumbled onto your mountain?" Callum pulled her closer, his arms warm and solid around her. "Not for a single second. You brought me back to life, Eleanor. You and Sarah and all the women we've helped. You gave me purpose again after I thought I'd lost it forever." "You scare me sometimes," Eleanor said softly, echoing words she'd spoken years ago. "Because I love you so much it terrifies me. The thought of losing you—" "Good," Callum interrupted gently, his hand tilting her face up to his. "So you'll know how deep I'll fall for you, how deep I've already fallen, today, tomorrow, and every day after." Eleanor kissed him, pouring years of love and trust and partnership into that simple gesture. When they broke apart, she rested her head on his shoulder and watched the fire dance. "Together," she whispered. "Always together," he agreed. And in the morning, there would be new women to help, new challenges to face, and new victories to win. But for now, in this quiet moment, Eleanor Reed was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who'd taught her that love could be gentle and strong, that fear could transform into courage, and that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and trust. The mountain wind carried their peace into the night, a promise of all the tomorrows still to come. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eleanor and Callum's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.